Hey investors, I wanted to discuss, are owning rental properties, a rental portfolio, is that a passive income in the sense? I think when people think of real estate investing, when they think of owning rental properties, they often think it's this like super passive activity, that it just builds wealth, that it's something that is relatively easy to do. And I wanted to kind of demystify it a bit, help you understand if it's something you might want to do. And this is a little bit different video than I'm used to doing because I don't have this huge plan of what I'm going to discuss in this video, other than, are rental properties passive? Are they not? How people ask me questions and my assumptions of their thoughts on real estate investing. So hopefully it's going to pull back the curtain a little bit. Hopefully it'll help you on your real estate investing journey if you're thinking about investing in a property, a couple properties, or if you want to build like a giant portfolio. So I was scheduled to have an interview with an individual today that has a lot of properties, more properties than me. And I have 40 plus properties, 40 plus rental units. And so they have more than me. And the reason that this came up, this talk about passive investing, is they are, I'm sure, relatively well off as far as their finances and wealth. But when you ask, like, is real estate investing passive? They pushed off an interview. And really nice person pushed off an interview just because they were so busy. And it really gave me this epiphany that a lot of times people are like, oh, I'm going to build this big rental portfolio. And in essence, they are creating another job, albeit that it might be a high paying job that generates wealth. But I just want you to think about a few things. And let's talk about goals first. So a lot of times the goal is to escape your job because you don't like it. Now, real estate is a way to do it, but it doesn't mean that you're going to like real estate any better than you like your job. So you really need to tackle that. That's its own problem. Real estate's not just going to help you solve that problem, or it might help you get out of that, but it's going to take some extra steps. And often when I think people are saying, hey, I want to get out of this bad job and real estate's going to help me, they're just thinking real estate is relatively passive, it's relatively easy, they're going to love it. And so they're making maybe some false assumptions about real estate and if it's work, if they can do it well, if they're passionate about it. And there's other ways to invest that are passive. And so the first thing that I want you to think about is, are you looking at real estate as you just want to do real estate as a full-time profession? Are you looking at it as, I want some passive income for retirement? Are you looking at it as, I want to run a real estate business, I want to be active in it? Because these are all very similar and you can do each one of them, but they are all vastly different in how you're going to invest. And so I think you can generate wealth and be pretty passive if you invest a certain way. That might be owning just a couple of properties and that maybe cash flow a little bit, but you're paying down debt and those properties are appreciating over time. So you're just going to use that time factor and not a scale factor of a rental portfolio and own like 100 plus units. Because often when you own 100 plus units, or if you own 20 plus units, it starts to become a thing until you scale to a certain point, and then you have to become a certain type of person that's going to be able to hire a COO that's going to be able to run your properties. You're going to have to hire a virtual assistant. So I have a virtual assistant that runs our property management. It makes my schedule way more flexible, but you kind of have to work through those things in your mind and plan and buy according to your goals. And so I think a lot of times when people are thinking, hey, this is just going to be passive, it's not going to be that much work, but then they're thinking about, well, I'm going to build like a 20 unit portfolio, a 30 unit portfolio, because that's going to build wealth faster. That will build wealth faster, but it does require more work. And so I just want you to understand that, and understand if you want to have a real estate business and be a business owner, that's possible and it can be great. It's built wealth for me in my rental portfolio. It's been good, but it has been a decent amount of work. It has not been passive by any means. There's still new challenges that come up that my assistant can't handle that come down the pike to me that are relatively stressful. So you just have to realize that. If I had a smaller portfolio, then I wouldn't have that stress. That stuff would be more passive. But if you're just getting into real estate thinking it's completely passive, I want to kind of demystify that and say it can be passive, but you need to understand you're not going to have a 15 unit portfolio or 20 or 30 unit portfolio or an 80 unit portfolio and it's going to be passive. That's not how it's going to work. You're going to have to manage someone. You're going to have to manage the manager. Even if you're investing in your all property management, you're going to have to manage. So I kind of want you to understand that and understand your goals. My goal now, and your goal might change. It might drastically change, but you do want to understand, hey, is it going to be work? Is it going to be passive? And if you want the passive side, then you're probably not going to have a 25 unit portfolio. That's probably not the path for you. You want to choose something a little bit different. And so, do you love your job? Do you want to stay in your W-2? Do you want to create a real estate business? That's what you're driving for. And so it's important to kind of delineate those goals to understand what you want and also understand when enough is enough and if you need to reevaluate your goals. So it was weighing heavy on my heart to do this video because the gentleman that I talked to didn't have enough time for the interview because he's running around to properties, because he's in the trenches, which I'm not knocking. I think that's great, especially if that's what you want to do and you're passionate about it. I actually love working with contractors. I am very passionate. I love when I get to work with my contractors, when I get to meet them at properties. I love that human touch. So I'm not knocking that. But if his goal, which I don't actually know, was to be passive, he's not hitting his goal. And so we'll end up doing this interview on a different day, and it's going to be cool to dig into this. But it reminded me like why I do a decent amount of passive investments to diversify away from just a huge rental portfolio. And that rental portfolio does require work. It's not completely passive. So if you think it's going to be completely passive, you need to invest a certain way and not just go out and say, hey, I'm just going to build this portfolio, because eventually it's going to require work. 1, 2, or 3, it requires very minimal work, but once you get to 10, it's going to start requiring a little bit of work, a little bit of mental energy. And so I just want you to know that. And there's alternative investing strategies to invest in that give you return to build your wealth in other ways. Real estate is still a great way to build wealth. I think it's an awesome way. I think it's maybe the only way that I could have built wealth as quickly as I did. But when you build a rental portfolio that scale, there is stress, there is a little bit of pain, there is some work. So I also want you to understand that if you do get to a certain amount of properties, let's say you get to 100 units, you go, wow, this was not what I expected. This is not how I want my life to be. Then you start pivoting, you start changing. And so it's really funny because when we're trying to set the next interview, I was like, and I think it's just setting your priorities. So you set your priorities on your calendar of what you truly want, how you truly want to live, and then you fill around it. I think there's an analogy of like, if you have a jar and you put the sand in first and then you put the rocks in, it doesn't fit in the jar. But if you put the things that are very important to you, i.e. your family, whatever, maybe it is your rental portfolio. Maybe you're single and it's your rental portfolio and that's the most important thing to you. Or maybe you are trying to get to a certain point, and so those are your priorities. But it's important to realize what priorities you want and make sure that the business is not deciding those priorities, that you are deciding those priorities. And so when we were chatting about when was good, I know he mentioned a few times, and I was like, oh, and this is where the epiphany, this is why I'm doing the video. Because I said, well, Friday I can't do after 6. I have dinner with the family because we eat dinner every night. And then we have a family movie night on Friday. And then I was like, I know you mentioned early, but I can't really do early because I bike in the morning with my dad. And that's sacred time for me every Friday. And I do that every Friday. And it was just kind of funny. I was like, man, I'm glad I'm not having to spend so much time. And I've built the business the way with the virtual assistants, but it's just important if you want your life designed that way, you have to build a portfolio in a way that isn't like taking all of your time and all of your distractions. And I'm not knocking that if that's the way you want to do it, just realize that that's how you're developing your business, and that when you have that glass jar, that Yeti mug, that you're filling up what you want those rocks to be first that are most important to you, and then afterwards you're filling in the sand that you're like, hey, this is super important, whether it's the things that I do in my business that you're keeping sacred, maybe it's the activities that you do, maybe you really like to do the design process, so those are your rocks. Or maybe it's spending time with your youngest kids in the morning, and put those rocks in there first and then fill the sand around it. And if something doesn't work, that it's that sand that you're like, well, that wasn't my major priority. So I just wanted to demystify whether rental portfolios are passive. And I'd argue that, they are to a point, but if you get over 10, there is going to be some work. And there's other ways that you can invest if your primary goal is time freedom. There's some other ways to invest, in smarter ways to invest, even if you're investing in rental properties. Maybe it's more luxury properties, maybe it's less properties, maybe it's better properties, and you're using that time equation more instead of the scale of the amount of units in rental properties. Hopefully that makes sense, and that provides some value to some of you investors out there that are looking to build their portfolio. And hopefully you can set your goals and your priorities first, and to make sure that your investing in rental properties is supporting your goals and not you supporting investing in rental properties and going against your goals. So hopefully that helps. I hope that hits for somebody, and I'll see you guys on another video.